Dragon Ball is a series that has run for over 500 chapters with hundreds of anime episodes, and in this long-running story contains so many different story arcs and characters all created by Akira Toriyama. And with all of the plot lines that Dragon Ball has been through, you would think that there was a lot of planning when it came to writing the story. Well, this didn't seem to be the case with Dragon Ball. Akira Toriyama was what you would call a discovery writer when it came to writing his manga. And a discovery writer is someone who writes the story as they go without a predetermined outline or any planning for how they want the story to go. And this was how Dragon Ball was written for over a decade. But when you actually read through the Dragon Ball series, there were some cases that probably made you feel that Toriyama did a lot of planning and foreshadowed many events. And this was because of Toriyama's use of retroactive foreshadowing. And retroactive foreshadowing is where an insignificant or ambiguous detail in an earlier part of the story is recontextualized in future events to appear as if it was intentionally foreshadowed. It gives you the illusion that a major event was foreshadowed long ago, but in actuality, Toriyama never planned that far ahead, and he used the technique many times in Dragon Ball. Different series often get praised for having a lot of foreshadowing and having a well thought out story in advance, but I think discovery writers using retroactive foreshadowing in their stories are just as impressive, especially for a series like Dragon Ball, where chapters were being released on a week-to-week basis, so Toriyama constantly had to think of new plot points in a way that felt natural in the story that he was writing. I'm going to be going through the biggest examples of retroactive foreshadowing in Dragon Ball that majorly impacted and changed the series forever. The first example of Dragon Ball's retroactive foreshadowing is the whole plotline of the Red Ribbon Army leading to the creation of Cell. The Red Ribbon Army arc started in chapter 55 of the original Dragon Ball manga. The whole saga had 3 mini-arcs contained, and the saga ended in Goku attacking their main headquarters, where we see him take down countless soldiers from the Red Ribbon Army. He then defeats Commander Black at the end, defeating the Red Ribbon Army all by himself. Then in the Android saga in Dragon Ball Z, we find out that Dr. Gero from the Red Ribbon Army swore revenge on Goku by creating androids that will one day kill Goku and avenge the Red Ribbon Army. And then we later find out that Gero also created a biomechanical android named Cell, who consists of the DNA of multiple characters from different races in the series. This major saga in Dragon Ball Z is directly connected to the Red Ribbon Army saga back in the earlier arcs of Dragon Ball, but it wasn't like Toriyama was planning on Android 17, 18 or Cell that early on, but he made it seem that way. If you go to chapter 97 of the manga, after Goku takes down the Red Ribbon Army, Krillin, Yamcha and the others meet up with Goku afterwards to help him fight the army, only to find out that Goku had already taken them all down by himself. Krillin asked him if he really did take them all down by himself, but Goku says that there were some who managed to get away. So this meant that there were some survivors of the Red Ribbon Army, and Dr. Gero was most likely one of those who got away. So Toriyama left this one sentence to be ambiguous, and once he finished writing the Frieza saga, he must have come back to this as a way to extend the story, but he did it in a way that still felt natural, because the Red Ribbon Army having survivors was already established long before Future Trunks came from the future. It's not like the Red Ribbon Army came out of nowhere or was a new evil organization in the Cell saga. And the Cell saga is now one of the most iconic sagas in all of Dragon Ball, and it's crazy to think that Toriyama was able to create such a huge saga just from that small conversation between Goku and Krillin. Another example of Dragon Ball's retroactive foreshadowing was the ever-growing potential of Son Gohan. When we are first introduced to Gohan in the Saiyan saga, he was portrayed as a very timid child who only wanted to become a great scholar when he grows up. But despite him being a pure-hearted and timid child, he had so much more innate potential than pretty much anyone at such a young age. When Raditz captures Gohan, he sensed that his power level was 710, which was higher than Goku and Piccolo's at the time, but Raditz thought that the scouter was malfunctioning. Then later on during the fight against Raditz, we see Gohan jump out of the space pod in rage, and he deals significant damage to Raditz. So this early on in the Saiyan saga, we are fully aware of how much potential Gohan has as a fighter, and it's not until the Cell saga where Gohan finally gets his biggest moment by transforming into the first ever Super Saiyan 2, surpassing everyone including Goku, and he takes down Super Perfect Cell for good. And obviously, it's not like Toriyama was planning on Gohan's big transformation during the fight against Raditz, but he gave the illusion that he had this big plan for how Gohan was going to reach his potential. Because when you go to the Frieza saga, we see small bursts of Gohan's potential when he was able to beat down second form Frieza, and when he got his potential unlocked by the Elder Guru, his power level was so high that Vegeta mistook him for Goku. Although Toriyama was writing the story as he goes, he made sure to drop hints about Gohan's potential all throughout the story, even though he didn't have a clear plan on how he was going to make the payoff, which eventually happened at the end of the Cell saga, hundreds of chapters later. Vegeta's character arc was also another big example of the retroactive foreshadowing in Dragon Ball. Vegeta was first introduced as the main villain of the Saiyan saga, the Saiyan prince of the elite warrior class who looked down on everyone beneath him because of his birthright. And as the series goes on, you see him develop further as a character, caring more about his family and friends, and being inspired by Goku as a Saiyan warrior. It's one of the best character arcs in Dragon Ball, and what's fascinating is that Toriyama never planned on Vegeta having this kind of character arc at all. The truth is that Toriyama actually plans on killing off Vegeta as early as the Saiyan saga. So pretty much in the same saga where Vegeta was first introduced, he was supposed to have been killed by Goku. But because he was so popular at the time, Toriyama decided not to kill him, and he kept him for the rest of the series. This was revealed in the short one-shot manga celebrating the 30th anniversary of Dragon Ball, where Vegeta says to Toribot that he was very popular with the readers to explain why he wasn't killed off in the Saiyan saga. And then in the Namek saga, Toriyama then decides to kill off Vegeta during the fight against Frieza, and he stated in an interview that he did it to spite his readers who were begging him not to kill Vegeta. But then he brings him back at the end of the Namek saga, and we see him develop more as a character as time goes on, which eventually leads to a sacrifice in the Buu saga, which might be his greatest moment in the series. So when Toriyama decided to keep Vegeta alive, he had to make it seem that way by making Vegeta entrust his hopes onto Goku to defeat Frieza and avenge the Saiyans, and then he makes Vegeta live at Bulma's house after being transported from Namek. And that was the start of Vegeta turning from being the cold-hearted villain into one of the Z Fighters. So Vegeta was never created to be a character with such a long-running character arc that spanned for hundreds of chapters. He was originally intended to die permanently in the Saiyan saga, just like with Raditz and Nappa. But if you were to rewatch Dragon Ball and you see Vegeta having his life spared by Goku, you were most likely thinking that Toriyama always had some big plan for his character, in that he always planned for Vegeta to reform his ways in the future, because the retroactive foreshadowing gave you the illusion that that was the case. And I think the biggest example of retroactive foreshadowing that ultimately changed the Dragon Ball series forever was the reveal that Goku is an alien who was sent to Earth as a baby. This is one of the biggest plot twists in the entire series, and the story shifted in a completely new direction because of this revelation. And Goku being revealed as a Saiyan raised on Earth was never Toriyama's intention when he initially created the character of Goku. When Toriyama created Dragon Ball, he took a lot of inspiration from the Chinese novel series Journey to the West, and this was evident with the characters he was creating. He based Goku off of Son Wukong, a character from that story who is a monkey that has the powers of a staff and he rides on a cloud just like Goku. Even Goku's full name, Son Goku, is basically the Japanese translation for Son Wukong. So Goku was never intended on being a Saiyan from the beginning. But if you were to go back to the series from start to finish, there were some bits and pieces that gave you the illusion that Toriyama always planned on Goku being an alien. First off, if you look at Goku's character design compared to the other Earthlings, Goku was the only character who had a tail, and this was a huge shock to characters like Bulma and Krillin, because it's unusual for a human to have a tail. When Bulma discovered that Goku had a real tail, he says that his grandpa Gohan never had a tail, because Bulma assumed that only males had tails. And remember, at this point in the story, we were not aware of Gohan picking up Goku from the space pod as a baby, so we thought that Goku was actually the grandson of Son Gohan. So it was weird that Goku was the only Earthling who had a tail, and he could also transform into a great ape whenever he saw the full moon. And throughout the early portion of Dragon Ball, Goku was shown to be unusually strong compared to the other characters. He quickly picked up on learning the Kamehameha, which was a technique that took Roshi 50 years to develop and master. But after seeing it once, Goku was able to gather enough energy to imitate the technique, although he couldn't perfect it at that point. So you have this monkey boy, who had a tail, had a lot of superhuman strength at such a young age, and he lived in the mountains away from civilization. And during the OG Dragon Ball portion of the story, we never once hear about what happened with Goku's parents, or if they're even still alive. So there was this big mystery about Goku since chapter 1 that made you think that Toriyama planned for this character to be revealed as an alien, but that was never the case. We get even more bits and pieces when Goku transforms into the Great Ape in the Pilaf Saga, and after Goku turns back to normal, Bulma says not to tell him that he was the one who killed his grandpa. And then Ulam replies by saying, more importantly, just what is he anyway? An alien? If you were to go back and look at this series, and then when you come across this conversation, you're definitely thinking about Goku being from the Saiyan race. Even though when Toriyama was writing this chapter, he wasn't thinking about the Saiyans or Vegeta or Super Saiyans at that point. But in order for him to extend his story and create new plot lines, he thought of retconning Goku into an alien, and he was able to tie it all the way back to the beginning to make it seem that Goku was always an alien since the start of the series. And there was something I always found interesting when watching the anime version. During the episode where Goku fights against Major Metallatron in the Red Ribbon Army Saga, Major Metallatron scans Goku and he identifies him as an alien. This was only shown in the anime version, and this episode came out way before we find out that Goku is an alien. Maybe someone at Toei assumed that Goku was going to be revealed as an alien eventually, and their prediction just ended up being right. I just thought that was something very interesting to look at in hindsight, especially when rewatching the series from the beginning. And because of this revelation that Goku is an alien, this shifted Dragon Ball into a more sci-fi type of story, and the world building was expanded upon because of this. You get the whole history of the Saiyan race and Frieza. Planet Namek gets introduced as well into the series, which adds more depth to Piccolo as a result, and it shows that there was a lot more to explore in the Dragon Ball universe. And these were the biggest examples of retroactive foreshadowing in Dragon Ball. All these examples were left quite vague and ambiguous in the beginning, but then Toriyama would then go back to those events to try and recontextualize things in order to write more story arcs and expand upon the world of Dragon Ball at the same time. It was a great writing technique for a discovery writer like Toriyama to utilize, as a way to think of new creative ideas for his story instead of having to plan out his story well in advance. I know a lot of people praise series where the writer planned their stories and character arcs in advance for a more tightly written story, but I think recontextualizing early events to create more stories in a way that feels natural and doesn't contradict each other is just as impressive. Because the writer didn't plan out their story, they constantly have to keep thinking of new ideas that connect to previous events, especially for a weekly series like Dragon Ball. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed this video, please drop a like, and if you'd like to see more anime content, please subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys in the next video.